Well, hey everyone, Christmas is over. I finally got everything cleaned out of the garage, made myself some space, and so it's time to start on a new project. This is a TV Armoire that I was given for free and got it on OfferUp. Somebody was trying to sell it and just having a really hard time getting it to sell. It is a two-piece set and it seems to be in really good shape. This is the bottom piece here. I don't even think I need to change these handles out. They look pretty good, so we'll just kind of may repaint them. Not really sure. The finish is pretty nice on it, but we'll see if we can get something a little more modern on there. What I'm going to definitely do though is no longer use this as a TV armoire. We're going to put it does already have a little rail in there, but we're going to put a more permanent dowel in there so we can hang some clothes from it. And this will be a wardrobe. Got the hardware taken off. Honestly, it looks like it's going to be a pretty easy job. Just need to do some sanding and get the sucker ready for a nice paint. Got everything taken apart, all the hardware, the doors, everything separated, everything organized. So one thing I have learned from other people doing this is that even if you're going to sand it, it is a good idea to clean it first. So we use a product called trisodium phosphate, called TSP, and you can get this on Amazon, but it's just an industrial cleaner, all purpose. You can use it to clean anything. It's a degreaser, but works really good on furniture. You'll see by the end of this nice clear warm water will be pretty dingy. So I don't know, I don't worry too much about measuring things out. Who's got time for such a thing? So we'll just dump a little in there, mix it up, and start wiping this stuff down. And I do wear a rubber glove because with chemicals that have abbreviations, who knows, right? Quite a bit of dirt in that furniture. No big deal, just normal life. These things just accumulate dust and everything, so, but this is dirt that may have kept the paint from sticking as well, so we wanted to get that off of there. So everything has dried out overnight, so we could start sanding now, but as goes with most projects, you usually discover some things that need to be done along the way, and in this case, we certainly did. There is a broken piece of wood here that will need to be repaired. So the broken piece is right here. Obviously, I need to replace this. I do have some other wood I may be able to use from an old furniture project. I'm wondering if I can just take this piece off and cut some of this off and then replace it with this one, tack it in, glue it, and then fill it, match the shape exactly. Okay, once we put a little sandpaper to it. Match the first part there pretty good. Let's see if we can do the same on the second part. of sanding. I think we are where we need to be. Pretty close line right there. Once I glue and brad nail this sucker together, put some wood filler on it, let that dry, sand it down. It'll be just as stable as it ever was, and we'll have a nice repair. Looks like we matched it pretty close. I will need to do a little bit more sanding to match that. I think I'm just going to use the electric sander for that. Good enough, which is something I hate to say. Like I tell my kids, if you're going to do something, do it all the way. Don't ever give up halfway and say that's good enough. Good enough for government work. It's about one of the worst things you could say. The Bible says if you're going to do anything, do it unto the Lord. Would you do something halfway for the Lord if He was your boss, as my mom always used to tell me? Whatever you do, pretend the Lord is your boss, and you'll do well. And you always find little spots that can use a little extra glue. Little tip, if you got a wood screw that's stripped out, won't go in, or goes in but just turns, put you a big dollop of glue on there, set it in the hole, put it in reverse, and drive the glue down the screw into the hole. Then when you put it in forward, screw it in, let it set, and your screw is glued in. I'm going to fill some gaps here, some nail holes, a big gap right here. And we're using stainable, Minwax stainable wood filler. Now, it doesn't look real pretty. We'll get some sandpaper on that and make it look indistinguishable from the original contour. By the time we put paint on it, it'll be all good. Well, it's been a couple of days and the wood filler is certainly dry. I always like to take something sharp with a sharp straight edge, put your sandpaper on it, and that way you get a nice clean edge when you're trying to recreate these grooves and things like that. And the cool thing is, if you mess up, you can always just put some more wood filler on it, let it dry, and sand it again. It's not exactly perfect, but it looks really good considering. And honestly, in furniture, if it's not perfect, that's a good thing. Chris and I did some brainstorming and we decided we do want to try to preserve the feature that this armoire came with, and that is this sliding dowel here that you can hang things on the inside or the outside. In this case, we're going to put a permanent dowel on the inside for clothes, but it would be nice to have a dowel on the outside if you would like to, maybe temporarily hang some clothes there while you're doing laundry and whatnot. So we want to preserve this feature. So our initial thought was to hang a new dowel somewhere here. Pretty easy to do. The problem is if this dowel is inside and this dowel is there, you can't really hang clothes on this top dowel with the bottom one inside. Also, if we're supposed to hang a wardrobe full of clothes from only 2 screw mounts, it's not going to be enough. It's just not going to work. It's going to rip right out. Not going to be a long-term solution. So if we have the ability to still slide this dowel in from the outside, I'm wondering if we could just get a pipe and mount it permanently here. And this dowel will slide into the new pipe, thereby continuing to have a permanent, steady dowel to hang our clothes from, still preserving the ability to slide this out and have a temporary dowel on the outside. So metal pipe, I think this will work. The cheapest one they've got. I'm here at Home Depot and I ended up going with a galvanized steel pipe, as you can see. And I found these curtain rod mounts, metal pole sockets is what they call them. And this will allow me to mount them on the outside, unlike a traditional closet rod mount where the screw goes in the middle, and allow the side rods to slide right through the mount and avoid the problem of having to drill out the middle of the mount. This is essentially what we're going to do. We're going to mount it just like this with a standard closet mount. In this case though, we can screw it in from the outside, not from the inside where the pipe is. So it is hollow and it's centered over that hole where the other dowel goes through. There's a lot of prep involved before you even start painting. Let's go check on dinner and see how dinner's coming along. 198 degrees. Look at that. Yeah. Nice pulled pork. Bone's starting to stick out. We are almost there. I think it's time to get started with the sanding. Now, the strategy here is just to sand enough off, just to give the paint something to grab onto. We're not going down to the wood or anything like that because we're going to be painting it. We don't need to expose the wood. However, if we go too far and we do expose the wood, then we run the chance of the tannins in the wood coming through the paint and causing dark spots. Now, we are going to prime to try to avoid that, but it still does even happen with primer. So I'm just going to sand it very lightly with a high grit sandpaper just to get some scratches in it, some dullness, so that the paint will really stick. I think that's looking pretty good. Might be just about what we're looking for. I think I'll get a wet rag and I'll wipe off this dust and see if I have a nice matte finish for the paint to grab onto. All right, well, I wiped all of the dust off with a wet rag. I let it dry and you can see the finish difference here. I did go through 4 of these sanding pads. If you need some of these and you have a power sander, which I do highly recommend, but I do not recommend buying these sanding discs from Home Depot. They'll cost you about $1 a piece, which can be pretty expensive over time. Instead, get them on Amazon. You can get them for what, maybe a nickel a piece if you buy 100 or so. So that's what I do, buy them in bulk, save a ton of money. You'll use them. Turns clear, you know, when it's wet, which, by the way, if you ever want to see what something's going to look like before you put clear coat on it, hit it with some water. It'll give you a nice preview. But also, we've got some crevices and stuff down in here. Rag just won't get in there. So I'm gonna hit that with the old air hose. So remember, I said sometimes you hit little bumps in the road and roadblocks. Well, Kendall has noticed that on this piece, whenever we put the hardware back on, the large drawer handle will be located here. The short drawers have knobs here and here, and we just cannot have hardware that's not centered. So I'm going to have to fill these holes and relocate them to about there so that they will be centered under this drawer. Basically move it over 1.25 inches. That should allow me to paint the sides, or the front and the sides of the drawer without getting any paint on the wood that I want to leave wood colored. So I'll do that to the rest of these. So I'm going to go ahead and get some paint stirred up. Kills primer. So I couldn't figure out what was going on. It was so blotchy. I don't know if you noticed, really hard to paint. So I took the canister apart and the straw had fallen out. So it was literally just sucking paint whenever it happened to splash up into the top of the cylinder. So got the straw back on there. We'll see if that works. Got some paint on everything, just about everything. As you can see, we do have already some tannins coming through where we had to sand. This was the heavily damaged area. We went all the way down to the wood. You can see some tannins already coming through. It's yellow. You can see here, something must have spilled there. Oil or some, maybe lotion, something. What I may end up doing is putting some white spray paint on it because it's oil based. So it just hit me while I was painting that this piece goes on top of this piece. It doesn't really matter what the top looks like, but you know what? Maybe somebody might use this one day that doesn't want them together, and they are going to be not permanently connected. So I guess, okay, like I tell my kids all the time, if you're going to do anything, do it all the way and do it until it's done. Guess that's what I got to do. So we just put a coat of spray paint on it, and it looks pretty good. I would like to let this dry, maybe put one more coat just to make sure, but we've covered it up pretty well. That should seal that stain in there. I'm also gonna just touch up some of these fill holes. I think the fill shrunk just a bit. It literally says resists shrinking and cracking. I guess that's just marketing. They're not regulated by the FDA apparently, so they can say whatever they want, but it definitely shrinks. So keep that in mind whenever we are using this stuff. Put a nice little hump there and let it dry. So I was thinking about it. I'm wondering if I sanded it too much. I did, after all, use an electric sander. I'm pretty sure when you want something done this precisely, you should do it by hand. So let me take a good old-fashioned piece of sandpaper on a sponge and try to get this sanded down just to the right level where you won't be able to tell we ever did any sanding. So if you can't see the lines to where the wood filler starts and stops, that's probably a good sign that you won't be able to feel or see anything. And by the way, I also grabbed our dowel that we're going to be hanging, rigged it up here so I could put a quick layer of white on it as a base layer. Now, I didn't use primer. I used this spray paint that is designed to paint plastic, wood, metal, and more, so should stick a little bit better. We'll see. I have my doubts about paint sticking to metal. So when you're painting white on brown, it's real easy to see where you've painted. What if you're painting white on white? Especially when you get up into crevices and things like we're going to be doing here. Well, the best way to see is to put on a headlamp. And you can see where you've painted because it will be shiny. And the places you haven't painted will not be. I'll show you what I'm talking about. Perfect example. You can see that I have covered the bottom 6 inches or so in paint, and that's it. So that's how we tell where we've painted and where we haven't. You gotta get a headlamp. I should have worn this during the pandemic. My glasses aren't fogging up at all. Well, it's time to put the last coat of paint on the furniture. And I did some thinking, slept on it overnight, and I decided I'm gonna be putting a coat of stain all over the furniture and then wiping it off to give it an antique look, to make it actually look dirty in the corners, like it's really old, which always bugs me a little bit that I'm putting this nice gleaming white coat of paint and then making it look dirty intentionally, but it's the style and it's what people like, so it's cool. It looks cool in the end. And so whenever you're wiping the stain off, it helps to have a paint that wipes easily. And so what I've been putting on there is a satin finish. Now that's okay and it works, but typically you don't paint furniture with satin because it is hard to wipe down. And I really didn't care because I put a coat of polycrylic on top. It doesn't really matter what sheen the paint was because it's gonna show this sheen. So it didn't matter, except that on the last piece I did, it was really hard to wipe off the stain because it tended to soak into the satin paint more. So I decided to run up to Home Depot and grab some semi-gloss. Now this stuff is a more durable finish. It's a little bit shinier than satin, but what it'll do is allow me to wipe that stain off a little easier, where I won't have to use paint thinner and things like that to remove the stain once I've applied it or over applied it in certain areas. So I'm gonna go ahead and swap out and paint with this. All right, second coat has been applied of semi-gloss. You guys want to see how the wood repair went? I think it'll be all right. There's a little joint right there, and there's still a little indentation right here. But before, this was completely cracked off. Let's go ahead and see if we can get this stain applied. This is a real simple process. We're just making it look old, so that means making it look dirty. So we take a dark stain. I'm just gonna take an old brush, paint the furniture, paint the stain on, and then wipe it off. And it's gonna be left in the holes and crevices and things like that and give it some texture, some depth. So it's gonna look nice. That's it. We just wipe it off, kind of leave it in some of the crevices and holes, one without it and one with. Ready for our first layer of clear coat, and I'll do that with the sprayer real quick. It's time to get the hardware going, and I went ahead and just spray painted these. I found that whenever I antique a piece of furniture, this heirloom white is just about the same color as the off-white that I paint the furniture. So I've got some screws that I just painted the heads on here, so everything will match nice. So I got the pull in pretty good and sturdy. Got these sliders in, but it comes out too far. It's not super stable. It'd be better if it came only to there. I'd have more stability. So I think I'll just put a screw right in here, limiting how far it can come out. All right, I found a couple of old screws, and I think this will be just what we need for a stopper. Stop it right there. All right, that is much better. Way more stable. All right, let's get the rest of the hardware cleaned up and put it back on. All right, that should do it. Got all the hardware back on. The doors, drawer handles. Had to tune up the doors a little bit, get them to close evenly. It should be closing just fine now. This one was rubbing a little bit, so I had to kind of bend the hinge a little. Just fine tuning. Everything looks fine. Only had one part left over. A nail. And I have no idea where it goes. Hold on a minute. Found another problem. These doors don't shut together. All right. Stand by. Let me figure that one out. Well, I could not figure out why the doors wouldn't close, so had to take matters into my own hands. I needed more space, get the doors to spread out more, so the hinges weren't letting that happen. I tried bending them. It really was messing it up even more. So I figured, well, let me just make a little extra space for the hinge on the door. So I'm carving out a little, like, 1/8 of an inch gap here. Well, that was a battle. I think I finally got the doors to close, but I literally had to carve out part of the door here and then paint it heirloom white, put it back together. I don't think anyone will notice, but I think it helps. We have the armoire in the house. It is loaded up with clothes and it looks really nice. It's going to be really useful for Chris. And the things on the outside are useful. The doors work. Everything closes nicely. But on every project, you learn something. Hopefully that you're learning some things. And on this one, I learned that shirts require a certain depth to hang. As you can see, we don't have quite the amount of room that we need. This area here is blocking some of the clothes. So good news is nothing's permanent, especially when you're working with wood, and so we can go ahead and make that correction. So I'm gonna just go ahead and see these screws here. I can remove this entire lower shelf portion here, which will give us just the amount of room we need to hang clothes in. So I don't even know if I'm going to take this back into the garage because it is a huge hassle. But I'm going to go ahead and do that here probably pretty soon. Just pop that out and maybe touch it up with some of my heirloom white spray paint. I don't know. We'll see what we want to do. But the good news is it's fixable. So, all right. But for now, this is it. This is the armoire. It is full. It should be very, very useful.